Okay, I already have pre-cut and bound and went ahead and labeled all of my power leads that go up to the switches or to the turn signals. So I have 2 power leads here for the left and right turn signal. This doesn't have any of the splices in it at this point. This is just the main power leads that's going from the moto unit to the front of the bike. So these are just the main, and then some, like I said, some of these are the actual switch sections of the harness. The splicing we'll do later. So I do recommend, and I also went through and changed to a different color on this diagram so that I'd know that that color was either 16 gauge or 18 gauge. And then I'm creating notes on here, such as the like the clutch switch. The clutch switch comes down and it feeds the ground to the start relay, but it's also spliced in and goes to the neutral switch and the neutral indicator. So I made notes on here to note that there was multiple splices in here, so that I would know that what other colors when they all tie into. And like I said, splicing them in, they'll be spliced in at a later time frame, whenever I have the wire harness more in a kind of a fixed position, still not finished, but in a somewhat of a fixed position. So I know where to splice and add my new wires, because I could have a splice down here in the same purple and orange wire, and I can have another splice down here. So the splices could be all over the place. So I just want to make notes on it. And so I figured I'd share that. I'm going to continue to make some of my notes, so I'll stop the video and then we'll come back and we'll work on something next. So that's it. I've done a little bit more on the main power section of the harness. I went ahead and I needed to splice in from the kill switch that provides the power back to the TCI and the coils. I went ahead and spliced it, and it is spliced right here. And then it also comes up, and then these are the 3 leads that provide the switching, the 2 leads for the, or excuse me, the 2 leads for the switching of turning the coils on and off from the TCI, and then the power main positive coming into the coils. So the TCIs generally switch the negative, so that goes back, and then I have it segregated here because I'm mounting the TCI unit back here because it's very thin and small. So these are the 3 leads that go to that, and then I have them labeled as, you know, what coils they go to, and then the ignition positive. I have the remaining power leads that come from the Mo unit and that go through and up to the front. So I just wanted to briefly explain. Wiring harnesses can be difficult, they're tedious. You have to really pay attention to what you're doing. You have to think about things. So that's henceforth, I don't want to sit here and bore the video by making it super long with me doing wiring when I just stop it, and then I can edit blurps out of it that I feel that needs to be noted. There'll be tons more of splicing into different wires on here, like I said, in different positions. You know, if you're wiring your harness, you're following along this video and you're trying to do the same thing, you'll find that you'll be cutting these bands, or you'll continuously be adding to the bands until you get all your wires run where you need them to be run. Same thing back here. I mean, there's still a lot more to go, but we have a really good starting point at this area. You know, when it gets down to the terminating point, that's the easy stuff, because everything will be pre-labeled. You'll be able to just go through it and figure out which section of the harness, like for the controls it goes to, you know, when it goes to your left and right blinking indicators, you know, those kind of things. Super simple. The horn, you know, headlight, all that stuff, it'll all kind of all make sense once you already start having it all in place. So when you're doing it, so just continue, you know, like for here on mine, I didn't draw the coils. I just wrote down that the 12 volt came in, and then I added this particular thing. So I have to update and add the 2 color wires that I've put on here. And then I continue to make my notes onto the right so that I may verify that I actually done those things. And when I get through with what I think the wiring harness is done, you know, I'll start going through and checking it off and, you know, making some slashes on the wires and stuff so that I know that I've done everything. You know, like I said, double check, follow through, make sure, triple check. You know, when you're doing your wiring harness, you don't want to be putting no positive on a negative, you know, so you burn something up. So consistently check your work, make sure that it makes sense in your mind, that if it's coming from this positive point, it needs to go to this positive point. Those kind of things. So we'll stop here. I'm going to continue to do some wiring. I'll come back and touch base if I find something that's important. But for the most part, it's just follow your diagram and continue to wire. Do soldering, whatever you need to do for splices. Okay, we got a couple more wires added. I have, I think, pretty much gotten all of the signal wires are all done. I've added the power and the switching ground that comes from the TCI up to the coils. I've rewired the coils because I took the old connectors off, so it's going to get fresh new wire soldered onto them and put back in. I have run my main ground up to here, coming from the Mo unit ground to a ground terminal that'll be made up here. I'll add that later, but this is a 12 gauge wire that's been brought up here. I mean, we'll have frame ground, and the two frames will be linked with a ground strap to it, but I wanted an individual ground as another backup, so there's a ground ran to it there. The TCI section is back here. I still have more of the TCI, but that comes from the pickups in the engine, so that'll get its own little wire harness up to it, and that'll complete that circuit. So that's pretty much done for that. I have added some more. I still have the signals, and I've had the others on here. So what I'm planning on doing now is going ahead and tapping in, and I'll tap in pretty far back in here for my indicators, for my turn signal indicators, and those will come up here, and any of the other indicators that tie into any of the signal lines or the power lines, those will get terminated up here, and I'll have extras. So even though the wire harness may get taped up to this point and then be able to be terminated at this point, even if they're back here, I'll be fine with that. So I'll terminate it a little farther back than what I would expect the actual harness to split open. So that way the wires are covered good. Same thing with back here. I'll terminate the rear turn signals, brake light, all that stuff farther back, and they'll be able to go back to the brake light itself. I've done a couple splices in, and everything's ready where I actually need to start splicing in other components into the wiring harness. The ones that I could deal without, you know, like the turn signal indicators. Those were easy because there was no specific place for them other than I tapped them back farther. And I went ahead and tapped in the this is the oil indicator and the neutral switch, because those items are right in here, so it will tie through into this way. Most likely the plugs will be inside the seat tray area. I went ahead and put the TCI in and put the bottom plate in that the TCI is going to mount on, because those plugs go right into here, so we'll be able to tie it into here. I went ahead and I had some different colored vinyl tape. I put 2 markers on here so that I would have my alignment point on the frame. So I'll put those on there so I could go ahead and start splicing in for the rear tail lights and turn signals, etc. All that back here. I could go ahead and get that stuff spliced in. Wiring in the start relay, so all those items can be tied into the wiring harness. Most times I run them back into the harness. If they're just like a U, if they only have to come back, go through here and then come out, I'll make a U and come back out of the wiring harness so they'll have their own play. And when it gets typed up in here, it makes it look a lot nicer. So anything that has to have a splice in at this point, I've already traced this all out, made sure that it'll, when I go ahead and put my tie mounts in, that I'll have plenty of room. Extra cable, I'll probably end up trimming anywhere from 4 to 6 inches off of this particular harness. And in the back, as you can see, it's actually quite long. So I won't need all of this wire, and definitely not in the TCI section. All right, we are done with the main section of the harness. There's still wiring to be done, but I wanted to have the basics here. Basically, I'm left with everything that's ties from this section of the harness into the controls or into the coils. Those items are done. And then anything like from the fuel gauge, it's got to go up to the gauge. Anything dealing with the gauge cluster, all that stuff is going to be from the front, and it'll be easily tied into here. I went ahead and kind of pre-routed it underneath here, and you can see I have written on the frame tab, tab, tab. So basically these, I weld tabs inside the frame so I can wire tie the harness to the frame as it goes around. As you can see, then it pulls it in, keeps it inconspicuous inside the frame, really hidden. That's some of the feature I like, so that way the zip ties are tied and they're local to the tab and they don't go all the way around the frame, which I think looks tacky. So all those tabs are there. There's tabs that will be going down on the inside of this frame that ties the ground. It comes from the chassis ground, and then it ties, I have a weld on bolt point here and a bolt point here on the frame, so there'll be a small pigtail that goes from here to here to tie those in, because the painted surfaces, you want to make sure you have an actual good ground. I will remove this tray, and then there'll be some tabs that'll be welded here and here on the subframe, and that's simply to tie this segment here. And then I will have a tab just underneath the slot of where the seat tray locks in to protect this wire. So there'll be a metal plate that'll get welded to the bottom side of this, and then this harness will be able to tuck underneath it, so you'll never hit it with the tab on the seat tray. And then there'll be a hole cut in here that the ground and a few of the engine cables, such as the neutral switch and the kickstand switch, the pickup coils that go up here to the ignition unit. So all those wires are right here, so everything will get made and get tied right in. And of course all the Mo unit stuff. Then I make a brass bar out of some, I usually have a lot of the stock laying around, so this is just a piece of brass, and it's just kind of a standoff, so I'm able to take all my wires and run them down and zip tie them as they go down into the actual the Mo unit. And then there's a tie-in point here for the ground, so from the battery to chassis ground here, and then of course the Mo unit's grounded to this frame. So it keeps my wires small and simple. The only major wire that will be coming out will be the one that goes to the starter. But luckily for this particular engine, the starter is literally right here. So it's going to be a short run right up to the start solenoid. So we're all good there. So basically, like I said, I'm going to stop this episode, and then we will return to this episode when I get to more of the final, or to a new episode of this segment, when I get ready to finalize the wiring harness. I said a lot of it's done. I mean, I already have the rear brake switch tied in because this is in the middle of the harness. This is the segment for my 1N4001 diode. That's the and then of course these lines, I already have my brake lines and running lights, all that kind of stuff all back here. So pretty much everything for the main harness is complete. As I said, everything that needs to be wired is up in the front, and that'll all deal with handlebar controls, etc. So in the interim, I needed the main harness completed so I knew where I needed to mark my welding tabs onto the frame so that I could get that kind of stuff done. And then the frame will be just about ready to, you know, for powder coating, etc. And then once the frame is completely done and painted, etc., the engine's all built and everything, then I'll have this all ready to go, and then I can finalize the wiring harness, and the minimalistic work is all that's left to do. So we'll finish this up and we will move on to